I didn't see the boat until the moonlight slid out from behind a cloud. The lake was glossy black. A pane of glass my breath might crack if I exhaled too hard. And there she weighs, an old woman. Hair like wet thread. Oars moving without a sound. She bumped the bow against the rocky shore beneath the cabin deck, lifted one hand as if she were about to knock on a neighbor's door, and tapped the glass of the slider with her knuckles. 3 soft taps. Then that voice, papery but sure. "You have to be quiet up here." It was 2 in the morning. My friend had gone to bed, and everything that followed began with those words. We'd gotten there late on a Friday. After the traffic on I-81 finally thinned and the hills swallowed the last billboards. The place belonged to a friend of a friend, a man with a weekend beard and a portfolio. The kind of man who inherited cabins the way other people inherited China. His name was Mark Hanley, and his cabin stood above a long, narrow lake outside War Spur. Virginia's seam of water folded between fir and oak, with a ridge line like a sleeping giant crouched in the distance. "Tell me that isn't perfect," Joel said. He was riding shotgun, a man sized for laughter and comfort, who wore his happiness like a jacket even when it didn't match the rest of the outfit. He rolled down the window and breathed. "Smells like a new day? Or a bunkhouse from summer camp? Either way, I like it." "It's good," I said, and I meant it. I always said I needed quiet. I didn't realize how much until the quiet arrived. We carried in the usual weekend baggage cooler. Duffel. The stubborn bag of coffee that never tastes as good as the one at home, and a few extras. Joel collects strange things other men his age quit buying years ago. Baseball cards. Pocket knives. A Roman-style gladius he swore he wasn't going to bring, and then produced from a towel like a magician who can't help himself. I am not a collector. But I turned 50 this year and bought a pistol to market. A little 9mm my wife had insisted on calling practical, because she knows there are other words I might use, and she didn't want to hear them. We had a plan, one day of shooting on the makeshift range Mark's uncle had built at the back of the property stumps. A hill as a backstop. A fresh coat of paint on the target board, and one day of loafing. We are not hunters. We are not even particularly outdoorsy. The range was simple. The cabin was not. 2 bedrooms. Heat that worked as soon as Joel found the right switch. A deck that ran the full length of the lakeside wall. The interior smelled like cedar and faintly of lemon oil. The bathroom was clean, and that mattered to both of us more than we admitted out loud. We poured coffee. We stood on the deck and looked. The opposite shoreline sat close enough to feel private and far enough away to feel safe. A mountain shouldered up behind the far trees, watching in that inanimate way mountains do. For a few minutes we didn't speak, and then Joel, who never leaves silence alone for long, said, "That's a Bob Ross painting right there." I half expect a tiny raccoon to walk by and ask for sugar. In that moment, I loved him like a brother. We did not shoot right away. We walked the perimeter like competent men do, which is to say we walked it one time and decided it was fine. Back at the table beneath the oak, we laid out the cases. Joel pulled open the zipper on his revolver and patted it on the grip as if greeting a dog. I popped the latches on mine, and the lid rose like it was proud to be looked at. We buckled on ear protection. We loaded magazines. The first crack startled even me, though I was the one who pulled the trigger. "Smooth?" Joel said, watching me adjust my feet. "Better than I expected," I said, and put 2 more rounds where I'd been aiming like I meant it. We took turns. We weren't showing off. Not really. We are middle-aged and past that. Or we think we are. Joel complained about his eyesight and then shot tighter than he'd predicted. I took my time. I always do. A hawk traced a lazy circle out there, riding a thermal like a thought you can't quite catch. And for a few minutes the day ran on 2 parallel tracks I couldn't reconcile, the discipline of the range and the easy mercy of the place. The sound came when I locked the slide back on an empty magazine. It wasn't a scream. Screams rise from throats and mouths and pain. This was a metal-on-metal shriek, a tearing that had no business in the natural world, like listening to a bandsaw through a wall. Joel flinched so hard his hearing muffs tilted off his ear. I spun, gun pointed at the dirt, muzzle down, because habit and caution outlived reflex by a country mile, and scanned the tree line. Jesus. Joel said. What was that? Bird? I offered. It wasn't. The air had the wrong taste for bird. We stood very still and listened. But whatever had made the shriek either had no desire to repeat itself or was satisfied with what it had done. Joel waved an open palm toward the lake like he was apologizing to a neighbor for mowing after dinner. Sorry, he called, though I doubt he actually expected anyone to be there. Someone was. Or something. On the far shore, a figure stood in the water to her hips. Face pale as driftwood. Hair washed thin. She was angled toward us. But it felt like she was angled toward the cabin behind us. Her attention on the building like a dog who's followed a scent to the back door. I lifted a hand without thinking. A city reflex. And she did not wave back. Maybe she's camping, I said, grateful for any explanation that pushed away the unease. Maybe she's a sermon, Joel said. Imagine getting lectured at a lake. We packed up early. There is a moment on any weekend like this when you know how the whole thing will go. A hinge that swings the tone of the trip. We turned toward a night of sandwiches and stories. Of a deck lit by a single bulb and a playlist too old to be cool. No television. The cell signal was good. We watched a video about a man who hand forges chisels, and another of a former paratrooper who built a house with no right angles. We told the handful of stories men our age repeat because repetition gives shape to the years. Joel said he worried about his right knee, and I said I worried about everything else, and we both laughed because it's funnier when you pretend the worry has a boundary. Eventually, Joel yawned and said goodnight. I stayed a while longer. Because the last year has been the kind you don't need details to understand. If you are over 40, you know the kinds of years I mean by feel. I lit a joint I told myself I wasn't going to bring and let the ache in my chest spill over into quiet instead of words. The lake held the moon on its shoulders. The mountain was a silhouette that felt like a person you once knew and no longer do. I saw the boat then, or the motion first. A shape smudging the reflected starlight. She didn't row so much as guide the oars. The hull kissed the shore. The woman climbed stiffly out. And she came up the slope without the small noises people make when they climb. When she reached the deck, she lifted her hand and tapped the glass like a banker waiting to be let into his own building. You have to be quiet up here, she said. My heart banged in my chest. I stood and froze a foot from the door. She was not frightening. That's what made it worse. She was ordinary the way a closed door is ordinary until you don't have proof of what's on the other side. She craned her head to try to see in past her own reflection. You hear me? She said, as if I'd been the one not making sense. At night it's safer, but you have to be quiet. Before I could answer, a lamp snapped on behind me and Joel's voice rose, loud with indignation, the way men go loud when they're trying to shout down their own nerves. Ma'am, what are you doing? It's 2 a.m. She squinted in the light as if it hurt. No, she said. No, not now. Not them. They sleep at night. But you still have to be quiet. She touched the glass once. Lightly, like a grandmother patting a child's cheek. And then turned. I watched her pick her way down to the water. Step in. And go deeper. Deeper. Until only her head showed, and then not even that. The boat moved without her. I don't know how long we stood there. Joel finally muttered. That's the craziest thing I've seen, and I once watched a man in Kansas City eat coleslaw with a fork he made out of a credit card. We agreed to leave in the morning. We agreed to call someone about the woman. We agreed to sleep. We did none of these things quickly. When day comes to a lake in the hills, it comes from beneath as much as from above. The water woke first. Green warmed into blue. And the pines followed, tips brightening like match heads. Joel made coffee. He put pastry on paper towels and pushed one toward me like we were in an airport lounge, and pretend hospitality might make up for a delay. We packed the cooler because that's what you do when a decision is fragile. You add structure before it can change shape. Then I ruined it. Wait, I said. Just a few shells. I deserve that much. Joel's shoulders sagged with relief. God. I'm glad you said that. I thought you were going to be responsible, and I was going to resent you for it. We walked back to the range. We did not talk about the woman. We did not talk much at all. The dew had lifted. The grass silvered into fatigue. I loaded the shotgun because it felt simpler than the pistol. 3 fat slugs sliding home. Joel zipped open his revolver and smelled the cylinder like he always does, as if good powder bore a signature. The noise came sooner than I expected. It wasn't a warning you can ignore. It was presence. The air thinned over our heads. The shadow arrived before the shape. And then it was where things like that shouldn't be, above us. A body, but not like ours. A chest like a crocodile's hide pulled tight over a human sternum. Wings skinned like a bat's and longer than the roof of the cabin. Eyes red not like a cartoon devil, but like brake lights through rain. The mouth was a wound sewn with teeth. Joel shouted. My name. I think. The shouting made it turn. The creature folded into a dive. Not fast at first. Like it was savoring the certainty of lunch. I brought the barrel up on instinct, and then I remembered the voice. Quiet. The words slid into my muscles. I shut my mouth as if sound might leak out of it on its own. It took me clean. Talons as long as my fingers pinned my ribs. And I felt the give of skin where it shouldn't give. The world telescoped. The ground fell away like an elevator you didn't expect. Below me Joel fired. The boom of the revolver at odds with the new rule. And the creature's body twitched once like it had sneezed. The wings beat harder. I shot a look at the lake because water had become a noun with weight. Don't make a sound, I told myself. Not even a breath with intention in it. I swallowed and felt the swallow as a sound. The talons pinched tighter and drove the lesson home. We cleared the water. The shore rushing underneath in a quilt of blue and black. And I saw her, the woman hip deep again. Hands folded like prayer. She looked up at me and shook her head with a sadness that belonged to people who have said things too many times to believe them anymore. I told you, she said. You can't be loud up here. The creature banked toward the ridge. I could see the line it followed an arc that pulled it away from the glitter of the lake and up where the rock baked yesterday's heat. The shotgun hung from its strap around my chest. Useless and heavy. The air had the temperature of truth. I slid my right hand toward the sling, and the metal ring at my shoulder squeaked. Not loud. Just the kind of noise you wouldn't pick up unless you were listening for it. It tightened the talons until my vision fizzed. I shut my eyes. Not because I couldn't stand to see, but because seeing makes people narrate in their heads. And I couldn't risk a word. We passed into the mountain's shadow. The creature climbed and leveled. Ahead I saw a lip of stone dark with guano and streaked with the chalk of bones. I thought of Joel, alone at the range, of the way he makes any room he's in warmer. And it felt like a robbery I wasn't supposed to forgive. Then the world tilted hard left as the thing threaded into a crevice in the cliff face. Rocks scraped my boot soles. I reached for the only thing I had, gravity. I sagged as hard as I could without exhaling. Let my weight hang on my ribcage until it burned. A talon slipped. Not much. Enough. I twisted. The motion made the shotgun strap chafe the creature's scale. And that tiny squeal triggered the crush again. A violent tightening like a hand closing around a wire. Where pain is, there is sound. If not in the throat, then in the head. I did not let it out. We skimmed a ledge. I hit stone with my hip and bounced. The creature jerked to correct. For half a heartbeat, my left foot touched the wall. I kicked with nothing. A mime performing for his own terror. And got the boot heel into a crack. It wasn't purchase. It was direction. I shoved. The motion surprised the thing more than it moved it. The talon on my right side slid. My arm came free to the elbow. One arm free meant one action. Maybe two. I clawed at the strap. Worked it off my shoulder. Felt the gun drop. The clatter was too loud for that tight space. It should have been a bell. The creature spasmed, and I don't know if it was anger or reflex, but it coughed me like a cat with a bad taste. I fell. Falling reads as a sentence if you've never done it. It isn't. It's a paragraph. Too long and too short. I hit a lip on the cliff and scraped. And then blessedly there was no more rock. Only air and then cold. The lake took me like a slap. Everything else made noise. The water made none I could hear from inside it. Only the ache of cold. The pressure on my ears. The instinct to breathe at war with intelligence. I kicked down. A madness. That. To seek deeper when your body demands surface. But the woman had gone under last night as if under held safety. And I am not a complete fool. I tucked my chin to my chest. The creature's shadow crossed above, a darker shape on the underlight. It circled. The water gave me an invisibility I didn't deserve. My lungs hammered. I opened my mouth and let out the smallest legal exhale, then pressed my lips together again like a child trying not to cry in church. When I couldn't wait anymore, I slid up along the slope of the bottom and came up under the dock where the cabin's aluminum ladder bit the planks. The air there smelled like fish and thyme. I took one quiet sip of it, then another. The creature's shadow moved off toward the ridge. Dissatisfied, a hand touched my ankle. I kicked and connected with soft skin, and a face rose next to mine between the ladder rungs. The woman. Up close, she looked like every woman I grew up with in church, upright and no nonsense. Eyes that had seen too much and still did the work anyway. Don't, she whispered, as if the hush were a fence. Don't make a sound. We lay there a long time, eyes up, listening to wings and the slap of water against the dock floats. When the shadow finally shrank toward the mountain and stayed there, she pushed the ladder away with one finger and slid herself under the deck, moving without the noises joints make. And I followed. In the dim square where light leaked between boards, her whisper fit the space. It listens, she said. During the day, it listens to the hills. A gun is a bell to it. A shout is a flare. At night it sleeps, but habit is hard to kill. If you're quiet, it can't find you. I'm bleeding, I said before I could stop the words, as if acknowledging pain made it more mine. The look she gave me said the quiet rule had loopholes for confession. You'll keep it inside if you want to keep it, she said. She wrapped my midsection with a strip of cloth that smelled of the lake and cedar. You have a friend? Joel, I said. Saying his name unlocked a door in my chest. He shot. Oh God. He'll either learn quick or he won't, she said. It wasn't cruel. It was a sentence ginned from the machine of her life and delivered without apology. We stayed until the sun moved and the boards above us warmed. When the woman judged the time, right, she slid out, glanced up at the sky twice like a pilot reading weather, and motioned for me to follow on my belly. We sculled along where the water met the shore, then waded in silence to a thicket of laurel where we could stand without standing out. She put one hand to her lips and tipped her chin toward the range. It was empty. For a sick instant, I thought that was the shape of the rest of my life. Then I caught movement. Joel, crouched in the grass, hat lost, eyes wide enough to see thoughts. He had the revolver in one hand and the gladius in the other. The absurdity would have made me laugh any other day. Today it made sense. When every noise is a nail, you hold a hammer and a knife. He saw me. His lips opened. The old woman raised one finger. He closed his lips and nodded so hard his neck tendons stood. We moved like a silent movie. Gestures, nods, the choreography of men who had learned too late to respect the place they were standing. Joel crept to us with a grace I didn't know he possessed, and the three of us bent double through the trees to the cabin's backside, where the ground fell away to the lake. There we paused, listening. Nothing but wind moving through pine needles in the kind of whisper that makes you wonder if the land has always talked and you were too noisy to hear. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of coffee gone cool, and of the faint sweetness of bread. The woman walked from switch to switch and turned them all off like an usher closing a theater. Joel set the revolver down on the kitchen counter as if it were suddenly too heavy to carry. What is that thing? He whispered. Not a what you want in your head, she said. A rule is cleaner than a name. You have to be quiet up here. That's the rule that lets people live. And the water? I asked. She shrugged. It doesn't like it. Maybe the way a cat doesn't like a bath. Maybe the way an old wound doesn't like rain. I don't ask it to make sense. I ask it to leave me alone. We packed in silence. The small noises of departure clink of mugs. The rattle of a zipper felt obscene. Joel wrapped his keys in a hand towel before putting them in his pocket. We carried our things in 2 trips, each of us learning on the fly which sounds we'd never noticed until we needed to not make them. The Jeep's doors shut with slow pressure. No latch click. Joel pushed the vehicle into neutral. and we let it roll a foot before he eased the brake. When the gravel road curved below the cabin, the woman raised her hand. We stopped. She stepped to my window and looked me full in the face. "You'll want to tell somebody," she said. "You should. But tell them this too. They have to be quiet up here." "I understand," I said. "Will you be?" "I've been here a long time," she said, and smiled without showing teeth. "Longer than you might think." She tapped the roof above my head twice. "Light as rain. Drive. No radio. No victory whoop. Save your relief for somewhere the hills don't listen." We drove. We didn't speak for 10 minutes, and then we failed. A low chuckle leaking out of Joel, like a tire losing pressure. It wasn't humor. It was a release valve. When my voice finally worked, it surprised me by choosing confession. "I was sure I was dead," I said. "I thought of you alone. It made me madder than being taken." "I thought of you," he said. It felt wrong to shoot, but I didn't know what else to do. "You kept it busy," I said, and heard the new respect in my voice. That might be the reason I fell into water and not onto rock. He lifted one hand off the wheel and let it hover there, a gesture halfway to a shrug, then put it back down. "I'm not going to lie," he said. "I will never again laugh at a man for keeping a sword on his nightstand." We told the sheriff. We told what we could without dressing it in myth. Men in uniforms are fluent in understatement. He nodded and made notes, and when he stood, he touched the bruises at my ribs with the brim of his glance, and then looked away politely. He said some things about property lines and safety and the need to be considerate. The way officials must when the problem is bigger than any one person can own. He said he'd put up signs. He said they'd patrol. He said be careful. It sounded sane, which is not the same as safe. 2 months later, a sign appeared on the gravel pull-in, "Daytime Quiet Zone." Sound carries in these hills. Be considerate. I don't know if it helps. I don't know if the point is to help. Maybe the point is to keep the rule in the air, like a prayer or a proverb, so it has somewhere to come back to in the afternoon when it's needed. I don't tell this story often. I am a practical man, even if my wife doesn't like that word. I work a job that involves emails about numbers. I pay taxes and change the oil. I still own the pistol, but it lives farther back in the safe. The scar on my side is not clean. It is a memory that changed its mind and decided to stay. When I do tell it, I leave out the most important detail because it belongs to the place and not to me. The second voice I heard in that cliff. The smaller screech that echoed the first by a half pitch in a way that had nothing of mimic about it and everything of teaching. I do not know how to think about a thing like that. I do not know if any of us do. Back home, quiet is harder to find than it ought to be. The neighbor runs a leaf blower more hours than God intended for Saturdays. My street hosts a man who believes his truck's exhaust is a form of speech. I am less tolerant than I was. Not because I am annoyed. Because I am afraid in a new way, and it is not flattering to admit that. Sometimes in the afternoon, when the sun drags the heat off the shingles and the dog finally stops patrolling the fence, I walk out onto the back deck and simply stand. I listen. I do not ask for anything. It feels like a kind of respect to make no sound at all. And if you're still here, if you're still reading the way you sit through a story told by someone older at a backyard table while the ice melts in a red plastic cup, then I'll ask you for something. Tell me what you think about this. About the places where rules exist that nobody wrote down. About how noise and force and showing off often pass for freedom in our culture when they're closer to selfishness. Tell me how you think about violence and injustice. Not as headlines, but as habits. Do you believe quiet can be a discipline and not a surrender? Or do you think the world only changes when someone bangs on the table? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Take a stand. Name what you believe. And if nothing else, remember this much the next time you step into a place that isn't yours. You have to be quiet up there.